Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name's Don Arleth, and welcome to World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw here on TVP World. The biggest party in Poland's ruling coalition has chosen its presidential candidate in the primaries. Tomorrow we'll find out who the largest opposition party will support. The president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces, has the right to veto, but conducts foreign policy in cooperation with the government. We'll have more on that in just a bit, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Secretary General Mark Rutte met with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump to discuss global security. "I'm not a dictator," says the last dictator in Europe. Alexander Lukashenko is preparing to suppress the next elections. And curtains drop on the great celebration of cinema in Torun. Movie stars and thousands of guests attend the Camerimage festival. Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski has been announced as the Civic Coalition's presidential candidate for the 2025 election. He won the party primaries with 74% of the vote over Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. The race for the presidential palace will soon be in full swing, as we are still waiting for the announcement of the candidate from the biggest opposition party, Law and Justice. Camerimage reports.
The Civic Coalition's candidate in the presidential election will be Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski.
This hall in Warsaw erupted in applause on Saturday after Prime Minister and Civic Coalition leader Donald Tusk announced his party's candidate for the 2025 presidential election. Before the emotions settled, we asked the Warsaw mayor if he thinks he's going to win.
I hope so. With such an energy, we will win the elections for sure. Thank you very much.
Trzaskowski's opponent in the primaries was Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski. Despite losing to his party colleague, there was no love lost between the two.
I accept the results of the primaries. Rafał, congratulations.
Rafał Trzaskowski, who had already been a presidential candidate in 2020, got 74% of the vote in this year's primaries. Prominent members from the Civic Coalition feel good about his chances this time around.
I'm 100% sure that Rafał Trzaskowski will be next president of Poland.
Early opinion polls seem to agree. Many of them predict a wide gap between Trzaskowski and a potential candidate from the conservative opposition, who hasn't yet been confirmed.
President Andrzej Duda has even blocked such bills like the one on the National Oncology Network. We don't want such a president. We want a president who will represent all Poles.
But Trzaskowski won't be the only candidate from the ruling coalition. Parliament Speaker Szymon Hołownia, hailing from the Poland 2050 party, will be running as an independent.
In my opinion, these elections are not party elections. We're not choosing political parties. That's what the parliamentary elections are for.
The final ruling coalition party, the Left, will most likely announce its candidate in early 2025. The far-right Confederation had announced Sławomir Mencen as its presidential hopeful much earlier.
Donald Trump put Elon Musk in charge of getting rid of many U.S. government institutions. That was a great move. We need to limit the number of public institutions in our country to give more money to Poles.
As we now know, the candidate for president from the Civic Coalition, and tomorrow we are going to learn the main candidate from the opposition party, the Law and Justice. The presidential race in Poland is just about to begin. From Warsaw, TVP World, Kazimierz Łyszak.
With just a few months left until the Polish presidential election, let's take a look at exactly what the role of president entails. Katarzyna Nowicka has this next report.
Behind me is the presidential palace in the Polish capital, Warsaw, the headquarters of the president, the head of state, as Poland is a parliamentary country. The president of Poland is only one element of the country's executive branch. Apart from acting as the country's chief representative, the president signs laws passed by parliament, appoints key officials such as the prime minister and the council of ministers, can grant Polish citizenship, convenes the council of ministers to discuss state matters, and protects the constitution and state sovereignty.
Signatures which president has to put under each project of the law, which has gone already through the Polish Sejm and Senate. So without his signature, any law cannot go through fully efficiently through the decision-making process and enter into force, which is very important. He has also prerogative, if he decides to put his signature under the law, he still can send it to the Constitutional Court. And we mustn't forget that now in Poland, Andrzej Duda uses a lot this instrument. Polish president, apart from representing the country and the state, he also is the leader of a national defense and military forces. So we mustn't forget that this person, even though has to cooperate strongly with Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Defense, is officially this main leader who may wish to co-decide about how the Polish forces are used.
The formal establishment of a democratic government formally took place in 1989 when the country transitioned from communism. While not the first president in the country's history, Wojciech Jaruzelski was the first democratically elected president. Then came Lech Wałęsa, a key figure in the Solidarity movement. Under Aleksander Kwaśniewski, Poland entered NATO and the EU. Lech Kaczyński was a pro-democracy and anti-communist activist who died tragically in 2010. He was succeeded by Bronisław Komorowski, followed by the current president, Andrzej Duda. We're just a few months away from the Polish presidential elections, and all of the main parties are expected to announce their candidates by the end of year. For TVP World, I'm Katarzyna Nowicka.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has made a surprise visit to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump to discuss global security and the future of the alliance. It comes at a crucial time for Ukraine as Russia continues to advance in the east. Mikhail von Blumstein reports.
Rutte has built a reputation as a Trump whisperer. It was him that praised Trump during a summit to put pressure on other NATO members to increase their defense spending. Few details are known, only that they talked about global security.
Serving as President of the United States has been the honor of my life.
With Joe Biden leaving, Trump will be succeeding him on January 20.
Trump is, for better and for worse, he's an extreme pacifist in ways that I think undercuts U.S. leadership, in particular on Ukraine.
Trump is now the person for allies to talk to. Trump's more recent signals haven't been too positive for Ukraine. Reports have come out that Trump is considering Richard Grenell for the new post of special envoy for the war in Ukraine. The former U.S. ambassador to Germany has said that he opposes Ukraine's NATO membership and that he would be open to partitioning Ukraine into autonomous zones. Hungary's and Poland's prime ministers have separately warned of rising risks from the war in Ukraine.
The war in the east is entering a decisive phase. We all know this. We feel that the unknown is approaching. I believe that in the next 2 months, we Europeans should not base our approach on the rules of Western European-style communication policies, but rather on a wartime logic. We must proceed carefully, weighing every sentence and word according to the principles of common sense. Otherwise, we'll see what happens.
Russia has escalated by deploying a new type of ballistic missile, Oreshnik, against the city of Dnipro.
As we know, as you know, no one in the world has such a weapon yet.
While North Korean troops are also on standby.
There were some 10,000 or so North Korean soldiers in the Kursk region, and they were being integrated into the Russian formation. I fully expect to see them engaged in combat soon.
Meanwhile, as they have been doing for over 1,000 years, the Ukrainians are trying to make the best of it. Ukrainian organ player gave a concert on Friday at Lviv train station. Her instrument was adorned with spent Russian missiles.
I want everyone to sing and have hope to get through all this when I am done playing.
For now, most of their hopes will rather be pinned on convincing the new American president for their plight and the urgent Ukraine-NATO meeting that is planned for coming week.
Up to 25,000 people died daily. Entire villages were wiped out. Millions were starved to death. There were even cases of cannibalism. In the 1930s, Stalin deliberately carried out the Great Famine in Ukraine, marking one of the greatest tragedies in the history of the country. Every year on the fourth Saturday and Sunday of November, Ukraine pays tribute to the victims of the Holodomor. Our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee, observed the commemorations and joins us now live. Good evening, Oz. Now, how did the Ukraine honor the victims of this atrocious event in history?
Good evening. Well, I'm here, stood outside the National Museum of the Holodomor genocide, and it's been a somber day here, of course. Now, President Zelensky visited earlier with a delegation to lay grain at the site. That's what they do. They lay grain here at the site. There's a statue just behind me, and they light a candle in memory. So we can just take a listen to what Zelensky had to say about it earlier today.
For every Ukrainian, this day is deeply significant because it is a day of remembrance for the victims of the Holodomor committed against the Ukrainian nation in 1932 to 1933 by the Bolshevik communist occupying Russian regime. If we lose the war today, it means that what was done to us 91 years ago will be done again. That is why we honor and remember, and that is why we fight, to ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated.
That was the director of the museum who I spoke to earlier today. Zelensky was here. We haven't got a soundbite of that. So obviously, the importance of holding alive the memory here is really, really important to the Ukrainian people. As you can see on your screens here, the delegation earlier that passed through. So a very somber day, a day of remembrance. There'll be another day of today. People light candles to keep that memory alive. So, yeah, a difficult day for the Ukrainians, but one that is also relevant today for what's happening. And that is very, very apparent in everyone that was here, including soldiers that were here laying flowers, laying wreaths in commemoration of the Holodomor.
All right, Oz Chatterjee reporting there from Kyiv. Thank you very much for that report. On the eve of a watershed presidential election, Romanians seem to be at the crossroads of taking pro or anti-Ukraine paths. But the growing discontent within Romanian society might heavily affect the election results in the country on NATO's eastern flank. Piotr Miszczuk has this next report.
This is Romania, home of the most iconic vampire of all time, Count Dracula. But Romania is also an important member of the European Union and NATO. It's the sixth largest country in the EU bloc with a population of 19 million people. Since joining the EU in 2007, Romania has seen an over twofold GDP growth, with its per capita income standing at more than $18,000. But now the country is standing before a pivotal political decision.
The president of our country is, in terms of constitutional powers, like the Polish president, a pretty strong president who is the commander of the army, the main person directing foreign affairs and doing judicial nominations.
With the country only recently having recovered from runaway inflation and still grappling with corruption, many voters are disgruntled with the political class, which might profoundly impact the election results.
We're going to vote for the least worst option from all of them, because we don't see another solution.
Though the favorite to assume presidential office is incumbent Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu, hard-right candidate George Simeon is tipped to be the most likely runner-up of Sunday's election, which would allow him to enter the runoff election, despite the fact that Simeon branded Putin a war criminal and construes himself as Europe's next Meloni. He remains critical of military assistance to Ukraine.
We won't be sending military aid to Ukraine, and this doesn't make us pro-Russian. We are for peace, and we're hoping that peace will be found through the efforts of President-elect Trump.
Amid the war in Ukraine, the US is aiming to bolster NATO's eastern flank. The largest American military base in Europe is currently under construction in Romania, close to the port Black Sea city of Constanta, and it is expected to be operational by 2040.
The NATO military base at Kogalniceno will become the most important permanent NATO military structure in the immediate vicinity of the conflict in southern Ukraine.
The first round of the presidential election will be held on Sunday. It's highly unlikely that someone will take office in its aftermath, so the new president is expected to be known after the runoff election, scheduled for December the 8th.
Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, who has been in power for over 30 years, has claimed that he is not a dictator. The longevity of his presidency alone raises questions, further intensified by various allegations that hint at authoritarianism.
Lukashenko claims that he has no dictatorial tendencies and that these allegations were unfoundedly put forward by the United States.
Critics say that I'm a dictator, that we have a dictatorship. Don't believe anyone. There is no dictatorship in our country, and there can't be. There can't be. Do you know why? Because in order to be a dictator, you must have the levers of a dictatorship.
Lukashenko is called the last dictator in Europe. He has served as president for over 30 years, which may not reflect the genuine desire of the Belarusian people. He won every election by a clear majority, but they were rigged elections. Opposition demonstrations were suppressed by the police, and politicians and activists were imprisoned.
Belarus people really believed that they could make any changes, and they experienced not only deaths that were not investigated. Several dozens of people were killed during the unrest that took place 4 years ago. And many people were tortured, and the record number of people, 45,000, went through prisons. It was the record number in the post-war Europe.
With 1,500 political prisoners unjustly incarcerated, political assassinations associated with the Secret Service, and the absence of fair elections and free press, claims of dictatorship in Belarus do not seem entirely unfounded.
Now we turn to the medieval Polish town of Toruń, where the prestigious Camerimage Film Festival has just concluded. Known globally as the premier event celebrating achievements in cinematography, it's a must-attend for industry professionals. Our reporter Carolina Chaplin is there to share the highlights of this star-studded event.
After 7 days of anticipation here in Toruń at Energa Camerimage International Festival, the wait is truly over because the jury headed by Kate Blanchett has announced the main prizes. Now we know that the Golden Frog went to Michał Dymek for his outstanding cinematography on a black and white movie, The Girl with the Needle, directed by Magnus van Horn. Another Golden Frog, this time for the Polish movie, went to Piotr Sobociński Jr. for the work on the movie Kos. And the Audience Appreciation Award went to Todd Martin for Tatami. Now, these was just one of the prizes, because overall 10 prizes were awarded tonight. And some say that these offer a preview of this year's Oscars. Others, that they offer a barometer for the true artistry in the movie industry. One thing is clear, for the last 7 days, Toruń has been at the very heart of the film industry. For TVP World, I'm Carolina Chaplin.
Polish presidential elections are just 6 months away. Now we know almost all of the candidates vying for the job. From Civic Coalition, Rafał Trzaskowski won the primary with 75% of the vote. The main opposition party, conservative right-wing Law and Justice, will announce their official candidate tomorrow. So what's at stake in these elections? Joining us now is the former Prime Minister of Poland, Krzysztof Bielecki, to discuss this interesting event, which is still 6 months away. Sir, thank you very much for joining me on World News tonight. Now, first of all, it seems that both parties have chose their candidates. Karol Nawrocki, an apolitical historian, could lead the way for the Law and Justice Party. What are your thoughts? Rafał Trzaskowski, Karol Nawrocki.
Trzaskowski to win.
Yeah.
He is a favorite. It's good and sometimes a little bit more difficult. Definitely at this stage, Nawrocki is an underdog and pretending to be a citizen's candidate, not a party candidate, as you mentioned just a moment ago. No, he's not representing law and order. He was named by the group of citizens, and hopefully Kaczynski and law and order will support him. So we'll see. It's a long way. If the candidate is not performing well, then Kaczynski will be forced to replace him with more, let's say, charismatic politician. That's at least my humble view.
What do you think is behind the strategy in choosing Mr. Nawrocki?
The idea is to show that in the days of political clash between two big parties, a little bit like in the US, that you have Democrats and Republicans. In Poland, there is also quite strong polarization of the political scene. However, Mr. Kaczynski, because he likes Poland in general and everybody in particular, that's why he wants to stop this battle between two parties and wants to support a candidate which is a citizens candidate, admiring both sides of political spectrum in Poland, which is, of course, a bit naive and demagogic concept, but we'll see in next few weeks if the public is eating it.
Right. And Trzaskowski, Rafał Trzaskowski came really close the last elections, almost getting there to defeat President.
That's correct. Rafał Trzaskowski for the last 5 years has been kind of a usual suspect for the presidential position. Well, has got some presidential skills, I think, and came close. I can honestly say that the last presidential race in Poland was unfair because the public media were actually acting only in favor of one candidate and against Trzaskowski. Even at some stage, a kind of a trap was set up against Mr. Trzaskowski, not to mention the very negative coverage by all the public media of one of the candidates. So I hope this election will be not only free, which is for sure, and also will be fair, which is very important for the future of democracy in Europe.
You were Prime Minister. How is it to run a government when you see eye to eye with the president? How complicated can it get when a president is from the other side of the aisle and you don't see eye to eye?
Oh, yes, but that very much depends whether we have a cohabitation or not. If the president comes from the same party, as it was in my case, and I was named by him, and we knew from the past and work during the solidarity days, also cooperated in the underground. And the underground, makes you really united and sometimes improves understanding without unnecessary words. So in my case, it was easy. For my successor, it was not that easy, frankly speaking. So, because Lech Wałęsa is not that nice guy as he sometimes looks. So it was tense. So very much depends on the party, and also I think on the personal good or bad get on with your interlocutor or chemistry, and because if we look at the present situation, when you have the party which was running the country for the last 8 years was law and order led by Kaczynski, and the President Duda is also named by Kaczynski and supported by the party and elected thanks to the party. But nevertheless, over the last 4 years or even more, Mr. Kaczynski didn't meet nor didn't talk even to the president, which for me is unbelievable. But in our country, it happens.
What do you think is at stake in these presidential elections?
It's a massive. The stake is incredible because theoretically we had a big victory of the opposition during last election, and Mr. Tusk is appointed the prime minister. So we have the new government, new coalition running the country, but so many positions actually are held up by the legislation, which cannot be changed because the incumbent president will oppose it. To give you the best example, which I really like, you can imagine that in Poland, as the outcome of the election, the general attorney is named by the government. So, like in the United States these days, that Mr. Trump, the president-elect, has named a candidate for the attorney general. So we have the same situation, but it's named by the government, by the prime minister. But can you imagine that the deputy of the attorney general in Poland is appointed in the way which is protected by the president? So you have to ask the president for permission to change, to replace your deputy. This is unbelievable, neither in business nor in politics, that I cannot have my deputy be appointed because the president from the opposite bloc is of the opinion that, well, this is the best deputy who, in fact, runs you the show. So, like in this television, can you imagine that there is a editor-in-chief or whatever, the boss of the station. However, the deputy is running the show because it's supported directly by the president. So, and this is quite a visible example, but we have plenty of those. So, therefore, the chance that the government will accelerate and really will prove strong leadership to the public opinion is after the presidential election, because at that time I hope that the next president will cooperate with the government and will not accept absurds like the one I described regarding the situation in the Ministry of Justice.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about the war that's going on behind our borders. We all know that there's a political stalemate between President Duda and the ruling coalition. Now, if this stalemate ensues after these next presidential elections, could this affect our security?
No, and I think in that respect, there is a good cooperation between President Duda and Prime Minister Tusk. So this is a good example of cooperation and good understanding. And at least so far, the situation on the eastern border and the point on the war in Ukraine is approved, I think, by 90% of Polish deputies in the Polish parliament, 90% minimum.
So security is something.
Yes, security is something which unites Polish politicians and from the top down to the bottom.
Well, I'd like to move on and speaking. Poland is an important player in NATO. How will both sides play this issue? Poland's role in NATO? Or will they?
Well, at the moment, I think Poland is a little bit like a prudent member because we contribute much above the threshold. Actually, we call everybody to increase the threshold up to 2.5% minimum. So we will spend almost 5% this year and the next year. And so we really want to demonstrate that in the days of wars and insecurity, we have to prove that we deliver not only nice talking, but also deliver with increased spendings, and the days of peace dividend used by the Western Europe since the victory of solidarity in 1989, those days are over, and you have really to contribute.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a certain changing dynamic.
That's
well,
correct.
former Prime Minister Krzysztof Bielecki, thank you very much for joining us today. We very much appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.